Welcome back to the Gold Newsletter channel. Welcome back. We really appreciate you joining us here. My name is Kai Hoffmann. I'm the @JR Mining Guy on Twitter and your host, together with Brien Lundin here on this channel. And today we have a fantastic corporate news update for you. It's with a company we've been following also on our channel, Soar Financially, for quite a while. It's Kenorland Minerals. They've announced a really interesting transaction. For me, I think it could actually turn into a transformative transaction for the company as well, because it's really proving their business case and what they're trying to achieve. They converted a 20% interest into a 4% royalty with their joint venture partner Sumitomo, and that royalty is going to be hugely valuable. I'm going to have Zach Flood here, the president and CEO of Kenorland Minerals, join me in a few short seconds. But before I switch over to my guest, you guys know it if you watch the main channel. Here comes the reminder. Hit that subscribe and like button down there. We really appreciate it. We'll have tons of news coming out from the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference over the next 2 weeks as well. So make sure to sign up and don't miss anything. Now, let me bring Zach on the screen. Zach, congratulations on that fantastic deal. Happy New Year to you as well. And thanks so much for joining us here on the Gold Newsletter.
Happy New Year, Kai. Good to see you again.
Absolutely. Zach, run us through the highlights of the press release yesterday and maybe a bit of the art of the deal.
Yeah, so we announced yesterday we had a 20% participating interest in a joint venture on the Frotep project in northern Quebec. The joint venture was with Sumitomo Metal Mining, a large Japanese mining company. And the project encompasses a big gold discovery that's growing. We made this announced it initially in 2019 after 2 years of grassroots exploration. But to date, it has about 83,000 meters of drilling into it. After the next quarter, it'll have about 100,000 meters of drilling into it. So that kind of shows you where we're at in terms of the project's advancement. But we did have a 20% participating interest. So we were co-funding our share of the exploration. Sumitomo is a much larger mining company. So, as these things progress, they become a lot more expensive to advance, and luckily we were able to strike a deal with Sumitomo where we converted the 20% participating interest into a 4% net smelter return royalty. So for those of you who don't really know the royalty space very well, a net smelter royalty is basically 4% of the total value of gold that would get produced from the project down the road if it became a mine. So it's a great deal for us. We don't have to, fund any more exploration there. We've got exposure to all the upside on the project, and there's lots of creative ways we can monetize this asset down the road.
Absolutely. Let's clarify, since you mentioned NSR, it's not a net profit interest. It's a net, whatever comes out of the ground and gets processed, you get a royalty on it. It's not what is below the bottom line at the end. So you can't get shortchanged on it.
That's right. Yeah.
So, in the press release, you mentioned a few buyback clauses of the royalty, or Sumitomo can buy back or buy down the royalty as well. Do you run us through those terms? Because I think it puts a bit of a dollar value, at least on a preliminary basis, on that royalty as well.
Yeah, there's two buy down provisions. So they have the option to buy down 0.25% of that 4% for $3 million cash payment within 5 years of the transaction. So that would bring us down to 3.75, and then there's an additional 0.5% buy down for another $10 million cash payment that can be exercised within 10 years. So if they exercise both of those rights, then we could end up with a 3.25% uncapped royalty, which is still fantastic. Plus, we would be paid a total of $13 million. So I think that's another great aspect of the deal. I think, and it does show you, I think, give you an indication of kind of the conservative value of what we think is this might be worth.
I was going to say, it's tough to really put a proper value on it, but let's assume you take the 0.5% for 10 million, times that by 8, the royalty should be worth $80 million Canadian.
Yeah, and it could be worth a lot more than that too, right? It all depends on how big the deposit is and what the gold production profile would be if it became a mine down the road. And this is there's a lot of ifs in that statement. I mean, right now we're at the advanced exploration stage, so there's no resource, there's no feasibility study on it, so there's still a long ways to go. But as I've been saying for a number of years, there's all the indications here that this could potentially be economic. It's a very high grade gold deposit. The metallurgy is good. It looks like it's got scale. So, in the millions of ounces type of range. We're in Quebec, which is a fantastic jurisdiction, very mining friendly. And we're pretty close to infrastructure too. I mean, you could drive I always joke you could drive like a Honda Civic onto the project site. So it's and there's definitely power lines up there. We're near Troilus, which is a past producing mine in the belt. So it checks a lot of boxes. So that's why I'm very optimistic about it.
I think I took a mini SUV out to the project once, so it's
Yeah,
fine.
2-wheel drive. Yeah,
exactly. It had standard tires on it, so it wasn't too bad. It wasn't bad at all. Zach, I asked you before hitting the record button because I wanted to verify and double check with you as well. But the original terms of the agreement with Sumitomo, where that if you can't participate for whatever reasons in your pro rata investment of 20%, and you get diluted down to a certain percentage, that you would probably end up with a 2% royalty. Now you have a 4% royalty that can be bought down. So you're actually you're making money because in the end, the 3.25% if Sumitomo chooses to exercise, which is probably a smart way to do. But you doubled the royalty interest. Like, run me through that a little bit, because that's a huge win for the company. But run me a bit through the rationale. Like, why was Sumitomo interested in that deal as well? Like, if you were to speculate a bit.
Well, I think it it consolidates their ownership in the project too, right? Which is really important. Now they have 100% ownership of this project. The idea is for us to transition our operatorship. Right now, Kenorland's operating, so we're going to transition that hopefully over the next year or two to Sumitomo, and they'll be running this project on their own. I think in terms of the numbers, we knew what our 20% was worth as well. I mean, you can run models and scenarios on a hypothetical gold mine there and see what 20% of the economics is worth, from the net present value perspective. And you can do the same thing for a royalty, right? You can just, plug in 4%. What's that worth? When you look at the cash flow model today, running the same scenarios you would with 20%. And what we found was that 4%, was comparable to the 20% of the economics. So that was really the basis of the negotiations, was trying to find something of equal value, because it really is kind of an asset exchange agreement as opposed to a sale of the 20%. And that's how we ended up at the number there. And it's great for us to. I think the buy downs are really fantastic. I mean, Kenorland's invested around $7 million of our own capital into this project over the last few years. So if they exercise the buy down rights, we actually make money out of this too. So we'll get paid back $13 million. So we're really creating value here, I think, and that's what we've always tried to do in Kenorland is be smart with our deals, smart with our money, and create value for shareholders.
Absolutely. I think the market is rewarding you a little bit here as well. You're not quite back at the IPO price where I bought, but at least there's a bit of an uptick in the share price the last 24 hours here as well. I had a great question lined up for you there, Zach, but timing. I think timing of the deal is one thing I quickly want to address as well. Like, why now? Why not next year? You're in a somewhat healthy financial position as Kenorland. You have about 23 million in the bank, and a lot more on the receivable side here as well. Why now? Why'd you decide to do that deal today?
It's a really good question. I mean, to be honest, I think the key for us was doing this transaction before we were too deep into the project in terms of our own expenditures, right? I mean, if we kept funding our 20% interest, pretty soon as expenditures start to ramp up, the project becomes more advanced. You start to get into infill drilling and more metallurgical studies and permitting and engineering studies. The costs escalate dramatically, and so had we been in a position where we've already started to sink a huge amount of capital into the project, it would have been harder for us to recoup that, I think. And so that was a big reason for it. I think it's better off in Sumitomo's hands right now. These projects take a huge amount of capital. A big mining company, they can stomach that. A small exploration company like Kenorland, it's a little more challenging for sure. So and also, our strengths are exploration, early stage exploration. Kenorland is focused on making new discoveries out there. We made this discovery. We made another one up in the northern Abitibi with Newmont. last year, and we've got a huge amount of ground that we're exploring elsewhere in Ontario and Manitoba and BC and Alaska, and also other projects in Quebec, and that's really where the team shines, I think. So, our resources are probably better allocated to finding something new and doing exploration on the earlier side of the spectrum as opposed to this advanced exploration.
That was my next question, but real quick before we get to it, just one side note. I think you chose perfect timing, because now the next press releases on the Fortet project would have been what do you call them? Like, investors don't pay attention to them, right? They're non-value generating, although they generate a lot of value on the project side, but the investors don't react to them, right?
Yeah,
Like metallurgical news, great. More infill drilling, great, but it doesn't really like move the needle, because the investors are greedy. They want the discovery holes, they want the long, high-grade intercepts, right? And
yeah, I think that the project was still, I would say, growing rapidly, and we were making big step changes in terms of the potential there. Last year, we announced some drill holes. We drilled down to 1,000 meters deep, which is the deepest part of the system we've explored, and we hit new veins with economic intercepts all the way down over 1,000 meters deep. So certainly there was a lot of exciting aspects still happening on the project on the exploration front. I think if we owned the project 100%, that would have moved the needle. I think the issue was, a lot of shareholders didn't really know how to value the 20%. They didn't really know what the strategy was there, and it was a difficult story to tell. Whereas now, I mean, it's a very simple story to tell, right? It's you only have to ask yourself one question: whether or not Sumitomo is going to build this mine, and if that's the case, then Kenorland's hugely undervalued.
Exactly. Looking at just the value of the royalty, it's just crazy. Zach, you hinted at it, and I think that's the next logical question here as well. What's next? You mentioned the discovery you made there with Newmont. Where are you going to spend your time on now? 23 million still in the bank. What's the plan for this year, Zach?
We have a lot going on, and I'm hoping next month we'll put out kind of an outlook for 2024. But in general, more grassroots exploration, looking for new discoveries. I mean, certainly we're on to something up in the northern Abitibi with Newmont, but we have a maiden diamond drill program at O'Sullivan, which is actually another project that we're working with Sumitomo Metal Mining on. We're doing more advanced or more greenfields exploration down at Chikobi, which is a joint venture with Sumitomo. We have more big geochem surveys happening at Hunter, which is a deal with Centerra. But I'd say, personally, what I'm really excited about is all the new exploration that we're kicking off in Ontario. We staked about 180,000 hectares of ground in the Wabigoon and Quetico areas, Western Ontario there. And we also have a huge land package, 100% owned up in the Birch-Uchi Greenstone Belt in the Red Lake District. And all of those projects are, focused on making new gold discoveries, and we own them 100% too. So we're advancing a lot of that exploration ourselves. There's indications we've got great targets coming up. They're starting to kind of poke their head out, and we're going to be going after those. And so that's really exciting. We also have a lot of work happening in Manitoba. We've got a big nickel project in the Thompson. We got another big greenfields gold and base metal project up in the Rusty Lake Greenstone Belt. We haven't slowed down, that's for sure. I mean, there's just too much to rattle off right now, but I think you'll see about $25 million worth of grassroots exploration done across the portfolio next year. It's a really healthy budget. About 20 of that's from partners, and about 5 of that's going to be out of our own treasury. But it's going to be another big year for Kenorland, and I'm sure something else is going to happen on the discovery front there.
Can I ask you about how confident do you feel about the markets? You just broke down the budget here for me. $25 million budget this year, potential $5 million from Kenorland. You have 23 in the bank. Question, maybe a cheeky one, but why so conservative? How do you feel about the market?
Well, we just, I wouldn't say it's conservative. It's just the stage at what a lot of these projects are at in terms of our sole funded expenditures, right? We're getting close to a drill target at South Uchi. Like, we have a big gold anomaly in Till, and we're doing some detailed geophysics, but we still need to do some more work on the ground there this summer before we have confidence in a drill target. The other projects I mentioned, they're very grassroots. So we're doing big systematic geochem surveys, property-wide surveys across all of those. So $5 million spent on the early stage type of exploration can go a long ways. It's only when you get into drilling that like your budgets really start to ramp up. So I wouldn't say we're conservative on that, but we're spending what we need to advance all of our projects across the portfolio, even the ones that aren't held under partnerships or earn-in agreements right now. My general view on the markets is this is going to be an epic run for gold coming up. I think we're focused on the majority of our portfolio is focused on gold exploration. I think there's huge upside in the gold price, especially when you're, in an environment of economic uncertainty. I think we're going to see base metal struggle. I mean, that might be a bit of a contrarian view. There's a lot of copper bulls out there, but and battery metal and whatnot. And we still have, exposure to some of those metals, but if we're in a recessionary environment, then there's going to be downward pressure on a lot of those commodities. So.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. It's like the question wasn't meant to be negative or anything. It was more like trying to understand like the budget, and you give some perspective on the markets as well. So I appreciate that. So no, I'm fully on your side here as well. Happy shareholder. You're delivering value, and you mentioned earlier is like investors didn't know how to value the 20%. I definitely was in that camp as well. I remember our discussions in the past where I asked, okay, like what do you do with the 20%? Like what do you do? It's like you're always the minority. Right. Yeah. And what kind of dollar value do you put on there? You're never in the driver's seat. You can't dictate terms, more or less. I think you've done a tremendous job turning that into real value. So
thank you.
Maybe a bit of a summary of the conversation as well. Absolutely fantastic deal, in my opinion. Really shows what you're trying to do and achieve. So congrats on that. Really, I mean that. So
thanks. Appreciate that.
Zach, very last question. You hinted at it. Next news item is probably going to be a bit of an update and announcement on the plans for 2024. Anything else we should be looking forward to?
Yeah, well, we've just about got all the certs in from the last fall drill program at Renault. We're still going to be press releasing results here. I still think it's very material to us, especially with the royalty. So we got about 11,700 meters of drilling that we're going to be announcing soon, probably within the next 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah, there'll be an outlook on the 2024 season, and there might be some additional, deals to be done there as well. I'm not sure if that's going to be imminent or not, but we're always working on new partnerships and staking new ground, new acquisitions. I think it's important to keep that portfolio growing, and it's going to be a fun year.
Absolutely. I'm sure you have a busy schedule at Roundup that's coming up next week. I'm definitely looking forward to catching up with you there in person, Zach, as well in Vancouver.
So, yeah, you as well.
Thanks so much. Cheers. Thanks so much for your time. Fantastic update. Again, congrats on the deal, and I can't wait to see you in Vancouver. And let me switch over to this screen here as well. Everybody else, thank you so much for tuning into the Gold newsletter. Hope you enjoyed this show. Hit the subscribe and like button as well. Leave a comment. What do you think of the deal Kenorland has done here with Sumitomo? You know my opinion by now if you've watched all the way to the end. And hit the alert button as well. That way you get notified when we upload new videos and interviews. And we'll be in Vancouver all of the next week. So we'll be taping a lot of interviews with mining companies at the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference. See you there, and we'll